Okay, so we are session 10 of 10 of crisis, loss, and trauma counseling. Tonight we're going to talk about counseling children. A lot of this is adapted from different materials. The bulk of this is from a paper that Earl Cook wrote for Journal of Biblical Counseling back in 1999, 20 years ago. It's amazing how relevant even this information from 20 years ago is. So let's talk about some general principles. While this may sound painfully obvious, the reminder is important. Children bear the image of God as much as any adult. Now, this being so, we need to approach children with the same heart we would any other person, applying the message of reconciliation to God in Christ to what troubles them. Now, children are born as sinners with the same propensity for self-centered and self-serving self-righteousness as full-grown adults. And in fact, while the way they manifest this evil bent may not be as sophisticated as that of adults, the same base motivations drive them as drive us. There are two key differences between our approach to counseling children and our approach to counseling adults. One, children will behave in ways that will not make it obvious what it is that's troubling them. So we need to be alert to the fact that problem behavior may well indicate that there's something else going on. It's not just rebelliousness. It's not just sinfulness. Very often there's something else going on underneath. This is the only way they have been able to figure out how to deal with it. And the second thing, number two, is children will need basic concepts about God, His Word, and His will broken down into more rudimentary pieces than most adults will. So complex ideas and sophisticated language aren't helpful for children. So let's look at these two things a little more closely so that we can begin developing a practical and effective way of counseling children. So first, children experience a great deal of the same problems in life that adults do. Think of fear, anxiety, anger, fascinations and obsessions, depression, compulsions, unstable emotions, confusion, selfishness, impulsiveness, suffering, controlling and manipulating others, a distorted self-perception, relational problems. I mean, anything that an adult can be troubled by and struggle with, children can as well, and often do. The difference is that they may most often manifest these problems in a basic and behavioral level because of where they are developmentally. We usually won't see this more sophisticated and complex jumble of attitudes and behaviors that we see in adults. We won't see the sophisticated, manipulative, aggressive, what the world calls passive aggressive behaviors and things. There's a lot of things that we see with adults where adults have learned to behave in ways that are more socially acceptable, and so kind of camouflage what is going on. Children don't have that kind of developed masking. Number two, children need the same biblical principles and truths taught to them as adults do, and they then need to be shown how to incorporate those truths into their lives just as adults do. These principles and truths have to be presented on a level that children can understand because of the difference in how children think and process things. For instance, you don't talk to children about radical depravity, but you talk to them about why they lie. So here's an example. Helping them understand radical depravity. Kevin, have you ever told a lie? Yes, sir, I have. Not really big ones like Johnny next door. He tells huge lies. Well, who taught you how to lie? Your mom? No way. Mom doesn't lie, ever. So it must have been your dad then, right? No, sir. Dad gets real mad at lying. Well, if it wasn't your mom, wasn't your dad who taught you to lie, then who did? I guess no one. So Kevin, can you remember when you first started to tell lies? I guess maybe I always kind of have, maybe. So it'd be a good guess that when you were born, you already knew how to lie and just didn't know it. That makes sense, I guess. One of the wonderful things about God is that he knows everything, even things we don't need to know. And he's given us the Bible so that we can know all the things that we do need to know. Isn't that wonderful? Sure, I guess so. So let me read something to you that God tells us in his word that can help you and me right here today. Would that be okay? Sure. Yes, sir. In Psalm 51, verse 5, one of God's favorite people, a man named King David, shares this. Look, I was guilty of sin from birth, a sin the moment my mother conceived me. What do you think God is telling you through his friend David in this? That I was born a sinner? That's right. No one has to teach us to lie, cheat, be selfish, or mean. We're born that way. Do you know why a dog barks? Because he's a dog and was born that way. That's right. And the reason we do bad things that make God and our parents and others unhappy is because we were born that way. So you've just explained the idea of radical depravity to Kevin, and you can then offer him God's answer for that in Jesus. So in the same way, other teachings of the Bible can be made understandable and real for children. Now, children are fully able to grasp and apply these truths when they are presented at their level of comprehension. One of the things that's helpful is to think of books or characters, stories that they're familiar with. They can be Bible stories, or it could be a character out of their favorite book, or like talking to a kid the other day. If you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? What would your name be, and what would your superpower be? Something they can connect with and they can identify with. Okay, so what is it about that name that would fit you as a superhero? And why would that be your superpower? They will tell you where they feel weak, vulnerable, and powerless. Do you see how simple and easy that is to do? So here's the rest of Earl Cook's article on counseling children. Take Billy, for example. At age 5, with little church background, he came to daily vacation Bible school for the first time. Our theme that year was, when I am afraid, I will trust the Lord. The Bible stories taught Billy that God is present with us at all times and in all circumstances. At the end of 2 weeks, after closing the closing program, Billy's parents came and thanked me for helping their son. He had never gone to sleep without the light on because there were monsters under the bed and in the closet. Only the light kept them from coming out and getting him. Now we know that that's not real or true, but that's what makes sense in the mind of a child. Halfway through Bible school, he informed his mom and dad that they could turn out the light. Why, are the monsters gone? They asked. Oh no. Jesus is here and he's bigger than the monsters, will keep them from getting me. Remember that Jesus rebuked the disciples for trying to prevent mothers from bringing their little children to him, saying, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. In Deuteronomy 6, God stresses our responsibility to teach and train children in the truths of God that have been rooted in our own hearts. God has given us and children the ability to assimilate his teachings. It's interesting that during the 70s, when I, Earl Cook, received counseling training at the Christian Counseling and Educational Foundation as part of the first generation, little attention was paid to working with children. In fact, the distinct impression I had was that you did not counsel children, but you counseled their parents. However, without conscious thought, deliberation, or the formulation of a theory of counseling children biblically, I found myself counseling the children themselves. A significant portion of my 20 plus years of counseling at CCEF has been with children. Let me assure you at this point that parents are vital in counseling children. It is my parents' policy to have parents sit in and observe the counseling most of the time. Now, the primary focus is the child, with the parents learning by observation how to understand their child, how to get to the heart issues, and how to apply biblical truth in the child's life, and then to reinforce at home the things that are being built in the child's heart and behavior during the formal counseling time. Now, without the parents' understanding of what you are doing and without support at home, little would be accomplished in the life of the child. So to begin, how do you counsel a child? The same way you counsel an adult, taking into consideration the child's level of development and understanding. The following steps contribute to the process at every point with the parents listening, observing, and, as appropriate, participating. 1, establish a relationship with a child. 2, gather data, the facts of what is going on, both from the child and from the parent. Now, on a foundation of love and knowledge, remember love, know, speak, do, right? On a foundation of love and knowledge, you'll be able to develop an understanding of the data and identify the issues that need to be addressed. Is a child experiencing a difficult life situation, such as sickness, loss, being bullied, or a recent move? Is a child sinning by rebellion, grumbling, lying, temper, laziness, fear? What heart issues are emerging? Pride, fear of man, selfishness, false beliefs, love of possessions. What's really going on? 3rd, bring the principles of Scripture to bear on these issues by explaining them to the child and exploring these with them. And 4th, apply biblical truths by very specific suggestions and homework that the child and parent can do to bring about biblical change and godliness in the life of the child. And then you monitor the process in further meetings until the parents have learned how to work with and are comfortable working with the child on their own. So now let's look at those 4 steps. The first one, establish a relationship with a child. Your first approach to the child is crucial. Direct your attention to the child, not to the parent who accompanies the child. The child is the focus. Forget that others are even there. So it might go something like this. You stand in inside the door of the waiting room and glance around. I'm looking for someone named Mary. Looking at the girl, you smile and say, could that be you? I'll bet it is. Then you kneel down to get to her level. And he says, I'm 6'2". Hi, I'm Mr. Cook. You can call me that if you like, or a lot of little friends call me Uncle Earl. Because I'm old, you can even call me Gramps if you want. What do you want? What do you have there? A doll? Is she special? Yes. She is? Do you talk to her? Of course, silly. What's her name? Matilda. That's a nice name. Hello, Matilda. You have a nice name and a nice mommy. Then a playful, high-pitched, pretending voice. Hello, Mr. Cook. Do you have a special name you would like me to call you, or is Mary okay? Mary or Mimi? Okay, Mimi. Could you tell me who these nice people are whom you brought with you today? My mommy and daddy. Well, that's nice. What are their names? Mommy and Daddy. Well, that's great. Hi, Mommy and Daddy. They aren't your Mommy and Daddy, she might giggle. That's right. What shall I call them? Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Yes. So say, would you like to go upstairs to my office? Mom and Dad can come. I have a lot of pictures on my doors I think you would like to see. Other boys and girls drew them for me, and I like them. After looking at her mom, the little girl says, okay. Now, the thing to notice at this point is the focus has been on the child, not the parents. And it needs to continue that way unless the child wants the parents to be included. Now, most parents will catch on and cooperate. If not, you may have to speak to them alone by phone or in some other way, some other format. You may have to give up a bit of your dignity. He says, that's not a problem for me. If I go into the waiting room and find the child on the floor playing, reading, or sleeping, I feel free to get down on the floor and wake them up. by blowing in their ear or becoming involved in what they are doing. The same pattern of questions or approach outlined above can be followed on the floor. Some of the adults who are waiting to see a different counselor may find this a bit strange. So be it. The focus is on the child. Once you enter into your office with a child, you'll want to look at the pictures and talk a bit about the children who drew them. I would like to put up one of your pictures too, if you would draw one for me. Which chair would you like? This one. That'll be fine. Mom and Dad, would you please take those two? Thank you. My final step in becoming friends has to do with Jesus. Mimi, I have a special friend I'd like to talk to before I begin talking with you. Can you guess who that might be? Jesus. Yes, it is Jesus, and I'd like to ask him to be here and help us because he loves us and is very wise. Is that okay? Yes. When I pray, I bow my head and close my eyes, and you can too if you like. Okay. Offer a simple, brief prayer. The above interaction is typical, but the responses and flow may vary depending on the child. Some children will be very shy and reluctant to talk. Just keep going. A little anecdote about another shy child and how you became friends might be helpful. But don't turn away from the child and place the focus on the parent. Cooperate with the child if she wants to include the parent. She might look to the parent for answers to questions, wanting to sit on mommy or daddy's lap, things like that. Now, people who specialize in counseling children often have elaborate setups in their office with play areas, interest centers, and one-way mirrors. However, these things are not an absolute necessity. The back of your door can be used for pictures drawn by children. On my desk is a pencil holder full of pens and pencils of various colors. Obviously made by a child, it attracts every child that comes into the room. I tell them the story of how I got it. A 10-year-old boy had big problems, gave it to me after God helped me to help him with his problems. I also have a box of candy or peanuts. The favorite seems to be way too sour blow pops. We suck on them together. We have fun getting mom and dad to try them too. Now, all of this may take half or more of the first session. Although my sessions ordinarily last an hour, I feel free to end early if the child has reached his limit. We've focused so far on ways to establish rapport with a child. Let's consider for a moment the value of having the parent present in the counseling sessions. The parent provides a center of safety and security during the time the child is getting to know you and grow comfortable with you. The child is coming to a strange place to see a strange person. At best, it is a bit challenging, and for some, it's a fearful experience. I happen to be a big man and I'm 71 years old. This can be intimidating. If you want to see the child alone, the child should be allowed to make that choice. There may be times when you want to speak with a parent alone. If after a few sessions the child seems at ease, he can be left in the waiting room with a book, game, or toy while you talk to the parent. Do not ever talk about the child in the child's presence. If you are talking about serious matters or are confronting the parent about something in his or her life that is having a negative effect on the child, if necessary, schedule a separate session with just the parents. Another reason it is helpful for the parents to be present is that you become a model for them as they observe your work with their child. Many parents have difficulty establishing rapport with their children and stepping into the child's world. Being present thus enables them to evaluate their parenting skills and to recognize issues which they need to address if they are to become more biblical and effective in working with their own child. Initially, the parent should be present primarily as an observer. As the counseling progresses and changes are implemented in the patterns in the home in terms of structure, ways of relating, discipline, boundaries, and truth about the Lord, the parent should become more actively involved in the sessions. Okay? So, and again, this isn't hard and fast, but that the goal is to disciple the parents in how to disciple their particular child. A lot of times people think they know their children better than anyone does. That's true, but don't forget, very quickly in relationships, we develop relational patterns, and it's like everybody has a role, everybody memorizes their lines, and you don't need the script anymore. People just fall into the patterns. And when you're working with a child, giving the parents tools and approaches that prevent them from falling into the familiar roles, so that the same thoughts and the same emotional reactions don't continue to recur, and you can actually make some progress. Ideally, this will occur with the cooperation of the child. The parent's presence provides a format for the strengthening of the parent-child bond. It's interesting to see the reaction of the child as mom and dad become responsive to the word and make changes in their lives. The realization comes home that we are doing this together, and that all of us need Christ's mercy and help and are under the authority of God in the Bible. Finally, the parents are a rich source of confirmation of the information the child offers. They also can provide additional or more complete information about situations. When the parent is present, the child is more honest in his reporting. And I want to make a side comment about this, and that is, be on the alert for the parent correcting the child in the sharing of details. Okay, because there are some parents that can be very exacting in what they expect the child, how they expect the child to share. Be on the alert for that, because that will give you an indication of some of the difficulty the child has experienced in life and why. It's the parent's demandedness for flawlessness. And the child doesn't really get a chance to share their take on things, their perception on things. So it actually robs the child of their personhood, their individuality. And does it really matter whether it was a cousin or a brother? Does that really matter? At the moment, no, it really doesn't. What matters is what happened. And then you can go back and revisit it. But be on the alert for parents who are overcorrective, focused too much on minor details. And watch out for a strident correction. No. That kind of stuff out of a parent, no. It's not okay. It is not acceptable. That parent is an oppressor. Okay. Nobody wants to think of it that way, but that's exactly what's going on. Okay. So, there are times when having the parent present during your conversations with a child can be counterproductive. One example is when there are signs the child is too uncomfortable with a parent present to be honest about what they are troubled by. A lot of times they'll shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know. They don't feel comfortable being honest. Work with a parent to provide the child the opportunity to have an open conversation with another adult that they trust, which is what you've been developing up to this point, without any fear of getting in trouble. Assure the parent that anything the child shares that is important, you will be sure to share with them. This keeps the parent involved and reassures them that you're there to help the family as a whole, and especially there to help them learn how to minister to their child in these important ways. This advice from one of the members of our own counseling team ties in well here. It's important to make sure we're not portraying disapproval towards parents and or their behavior to the children, even when it is clearly wrong, because the children, will pick up on this and to see this as a rejection or disapproval of them, as they naturally see themselves as an extension of mom or dad. Rather, we focus on God's truths to combat the lies and shame messages indirectly until they're older teens or young adults, when they're able to more clearly work through these things themselves. So, gather data. Contact the parents before the first session with the child to get a picture of the situation. What is the reason for bringing the child to counseling? When did the problems first appear? What events surrounded the beginning of the problem? What patterns did the parents discern? And I just did this last week with a mom and a daughter who's 20, living at home. And the reason they were coming was because of a breakdown in mom and the daughter's relationship. And the language that I was getting from the mom seemed like she had expectations of her adult daughter to be more cooperative, like a younger child would, and not an adult child. That seemed to be the flavor of things when the mom and I were talking. So interestingly enough, we came in and talked, and I said, so what are the two of you hoping for today as the three of us connect? And because I've got their basic information form and their basic, mom's focusing on relationship breakdown and relationship with the daughter. The daughter's got other things. She said, I'm wondering whether or not I have PTSD. Well, there's two completely different focus, right? So mom shared what was on her heart, and the daughter said, and it was just something I was picking up on. I said, when your mom makes that assessment of your relationship, would you agree that that's a good description of the relationship, or are there words that you think might be better for describing the relationship? And I shifted the focus over to the daughter. And so what mom got to see was me interacting with her daughter, her adult daughter, and discovering things that have been going on with her daughter, deeply wounding things, woundedness she'd been carrying since she was 13 years old. And it all started to unfold within 10 minutes. Mom had no idea. And there are all kinds of reasons for that. But mom didn't even know how to ask the questions because mom had expectations of the daughter to behave a certain way. And if the daughter wasn't behaving a certain way, that had to be rebellion. Couldn't be anything else. Right? So, as we said before, in the first and all subsequent sessions, the focus must be on the child. It's important that Billy understand what is happening too. Billy, do you know what I do? You talk to people? That's right. Do you know what I talk to people about? No. Well, I talk to people about things that are happening in their lives that are making trouble for them, and I try to help them. How can you help them? Well, I have a book called the Bible that God wrote, and he tells us the answers to all of our problems. So boys and girls and moms and dads find God's answers to the things that are troubling them. That's called counseling. That's what I do. So would you be willing to talk to me about any problems you have and look for God's answers with me? Maybe. Good. You might notice a child looking at a box of lollipops displayed prominently on the desk. Would you like one? Yes. Pick the one you want. How about mom and dad? Give them one too. He does. What's the best thing to do with lollipops? Eat them? Yeah, I'll have one too. It's important to involve the child in giving you the data. You'll want to be able to talk with the child about it directly and comfortably. This begins with helping him to verbalize it in his own words. One little 9-year-old boy was very embarrassed and would not identify the problem, even though he knew what it was. He asked his dad to tell me and wanted to stand in the hall with the door closed while this happened. He was allowed to do this and then was invited back in. His problem was thinking at times about ladies and the parts of their bodies, especially their breasts. Okay, now he's 9 years old. Okay. Upon his return, I asked him to let me tell him what his dad shared to make sure it was accurate. Note that I did not doubt the father, but used this as a means of involving the boy in verbalizing the problem. I went through this several months ago with a mom who'd reached out to me, single mom, who had a 12-year-old boy, homeschooling, family, all this stuff, but she had discovered internet pornography. He wanted mom to tell me, we were connecting like this, wanted mom to tell me what the problem was. And he got up and left the room, came back. So from what your mom said, that she discovered, that you discovered pornography on the internet. Is that what happened? Yeah. Okay. So how did that happen? How did that, tell me that story about how you ran across that. No judgment, nothing. Just say, let's get more into the detail of all of this. Make him comfortable with his own story. So in the context of much embarrassment, hesitation, and cajoling, he allowed this. It was the beginning of freedom to discuss the matter and think about what the Bible says about our bodies. Now, a variety of ways can be used to draw children out, depending on their age and their willingness. You also have to be a little sensitive to relational dynamics between them and adults, and them and their parents. So one of the first things to do is ask direct questions. Can you tell me the reason that mom or mommy, depending on the age of the child, brought you to see me today? If there's no response, you can ask permission of the child to ask the parent who's with them. Would it be okay if I asked your mom why she brought you today? Note that the parent will be only too happy to chime in and fill in the details, and so must be encouraged to do this only as asked, so the child can be directly involved in the counseling. Watch the child, watch their nonverbals during the parent's report for facial expression and body language, all kinds of, some of the subtle things. Do they stiffen up? Do they turn away? Do they slouch down? What's going on with them? You can learn a whole lot by his nonverbal response. Sometimes the child will break in with denials or anger. You'll need him help him control this until the parent's account is finished. Say, okay, I can tell this is a big deal to you, so let's let your mom finish, and when she's finished, then it'll be your turn, okay? Notice and pay attention to the parent's tone of voice and their attitude as well. Are they judgmental or gracious? Are they fearful or trusting? Is it one-sided or balanced? And then use stories. There was a time when a boy named Billy had a problem, and his problem was blank. If children are reluctant to verbalize their problems in the session, you might ask them to write it, age appropriate, for homework. And use pictures. Some children like to draw, and you can benefit from this. A little 8-year-old girl had problems with anxiety and generalized fear. Asked her to draw pictures of her fears, and she drew a picture of a goblin with power rays shooting out of its head. I learned what goblins look like, and I thanked her. She also drew a picture of a phantom. She had seen Phantom of the Opera, and it had triggered this fear. Most significant was a picture of a house with a flagstone walk, obviously her house, with smoke and flame shooting out of all the windows and doors. These were most revealing. Pictures can be windows into the mind of a child. What started the fire? Those are the kinds of questions you can ask, right? What started the fire? What happened as the fire raced through the house? Have them describe the scene that they've captured in their picture. Children have vivid imaginations, which you can tap into. Ask them to make a picture in their mind of the problem and then describe the picture for you. I asked a little girl who had regular tantrums to describe a very recent one for me. I got a wonderful picture of her tantrum and was able to talk about it by using the picture. I suggested changes she could put into the picture and then talked about how these changes would make the whole picture different and better. And the reason that's helpful is because you're not talking about her and her behavior, you're talking about the picture that she shared. So she's insulated a little bit. Okay. Mention friends. You can engage children by asking them what is nice about their friends and what is not nice about their friends, and then asking them to tell you what is nice and not nice about themselves. You'll want to find out how much of the bad behavior, such as tantrums, expressions, conscious and deliberate attempts to control, manipulate, or punish others. The goal is to bring all behavior into the realm of consciousness, so you can learn, you can then begin to work toward helping them control it by choosing God's way instead of my way. Be inventive in seeking to engage the child in offering the data and identifying the issues to be handled. There's a lot of different ways that you can engage the child. One of the things I'll do with children, I can remember a family coming to me, and Dad came reluctantly. It was another homeschooling family. They'd gone on a road trip together to California and back. And I want to say 10 or 11-year-old boy, and there was a 13-year-old girl. So the boy, they were in Redding, California. They were just pulling away from a drive-through restaurant. As they pulled up and paused just before pulling out into traffic, the kid opened the door and stepped out of the car, slammed the door, and started running down the sidewalk. So they'd gotten my information, and they came and they were seeing me, and we talked through it. And I said, "Wow, that sounds scary." And I said, "Were you scared then?" Yeah. Okay. So let's pretend everybody in the car that day was a different animal. What animal would you have been? What animal would your sister have been? What animal would your mom have been? What animal would your dad have been? Dad was a big grizzly bear. That's really scary. So was he like super grizzly or sort of grizzly when you got out of the car and ran? Super grizzly. So you see what I'm doing? I'm getting him to share the facts, but he's not pointing at Dad. He's talking about the grizzly, right? Because children want to protect their parents, and they don't want to have to say bad things, even if they're true. So you give them an opportunity. So and one of the things I said, okay, so you were, I can't remember what he was. I can't remember. So you were this animal. Okay, so I want you to pretend I'm an alien from outer space. We don't have those kind of animals on our planet. So what is that animal like? And I got him to do that with each one of the animals. So he's giving me his frame of reference and his worldview and why he selected those particular animals to represent the 4 people in the car. So that's just one inventive way of making it safe for children to say what they need to say, so that you can actually get to the bottom of what was going on. What was really interesting about that, I met with the family for a couple of hours, and the parents were just dumbfounded, because I asked the sister, I said, "So what do you think about your brother's choice of animals? Would you agree with his choices of animals, or would you pick different animals?" So we talked through that. Dad being a grizzly bear, she agreed with that picture. And you can see the look on Dad's face. He was just dumbfounded. He was just trying to get somebody to behave, but it was over controlling, and he was yelling and being really loud and scary. And he's behind the wheel of a car, and he was driving more aggressively, right? And that was scary too. So anyway, it ended up being very, very effective and helpful. Okay. All right. Use the Bible well in teaching. With children, as with adults, the Bible is the foundation of the change you seek to bring about in their life. Children are capable of a strong faith, sometimes even stronger than adults. And they're capable of being converted. And they're capable of becoming part of the kingdom of God and the family of God. Have a children's version of the Bible in your office for use when you work with them. With the anxious child, you might review one of the great Bible stories, such as David and Goliath. Read it first so they know that it's coming from the Word of God. Then retell it, explaining it, dramatizing it, building up suspense until you finally ask the question, how did David have the courage to face Goliath when none of his brothers or the king or any of the other soldiers did? Because he knew God would help him. That's right. David said, my God and I are going to take you out. Become a storyteller. Children love stories. You can then explain that God is with all of us, and especially the child you're counseling. The wonderful knowledge and the intimate presence of God in Psalm 139 can be very precious to children when explained in ways they can understand. Susie, can you surprise your mom or dad? Yes. Can you hide behind a door and jump out and surprise me? Sure, that'd be fun. Can we do it now? Well, it wouldn't be a surprise now because I'll know what you're doing, that you're doing it. See if you can surprise me. See if you can surprise me next week. Now, here's a hard question. Can you ever surprise God? I don't know. Well, let's see what the Bible has to say. Turn to Psalm 139 and read with Susie, or let her read if she can. So what does God say he does? He searches and knows me. Yes, he watches you and me so that he can see and know everything about us. Susie, help me a minute, okay? Okay, stand up and then sit down. She does. I wonder if that surprised God. I don't know. What does the Bible say? And if you have to, read it. He knows when I sit down and when I stand up. Yes, in fact, it says that he knows what you're thinking. He knows what you're going to say before the words cross your lips. He wants you to think good thoughts, and he knows where and what you're going to do today. That's what path means. He knows the words you're going to speak, even the ones that aren't so nice sometimes. He knows everything about you. God is never surprised, and he watches out for you all the time. Do you think God is surprised by the things you're afraid of, or your anxious and fearful thoughts or dreams? I guess not. No, he isn't. And best of all, he wants to help us with them. Would you like to know something else pretty wonderful about God? Okay. There's no place in all the world you can go or be where God is not there. I bet there is. Where? In my closet. Nope. On the moon? Nope. Read some more for me. The child reads verses 7 through 12. What is God trying to tell us? That anywhere we go, he's there. Right. What does that mean when you think about places you're afraid to go? So using the Bible with a child helps lead her through these kinds of questions. All right. So then assign homework. Children need practice if they're to build something new into their lives, just like anybody else. This makes reinforcement of the things happening in this session very important. At the same time, the child is easily overwhelmed by a multiplicity of assignments. So it's wise to pick out one thing that you wish to build into the child and focus on that in the homework. For example, if you had a child draw pictures of his fears and place a sticky label that says God on the picture, you might ask the child to do the same thing the next time he's afraid. The variation would be to have a verse from Psalm 139 on the label and place it on the picture. A good way to reinforce your teaching from Psalm 139 is to have the child's parent read the applicable portion of the passage each day with the child and offer a prayer of thanksgiving to God for being with him that day. The parent can also talk with the child about the events of the day and how God has been there in the child's and the parent's lives. One thing, and I've talked about this before, children have a hard time going to sleep or staying asleep or have nightmares or night terrors. I have their parents read Psalm 4 verse 8 out loud to them and have the child say it with them several times before they close their eyes to go to sleep. Somebody have that and read that? It's good for adults too, by the way. Anybody?
Say that psalm again, Warren.
Psalm 4, verse 8. You know, if you have a paper Bible, you might be able to find it faster.
Mm-hmm. It says, I will lie down and sleep peacefully, for you, Lord, make me safe and secure.
Yeah. I will lie down in perfect peace, for you make me lie down, make me lie in safety. You make me safe. Have the parent read it out loud. Have the child recite it with them several times. Do it every night, every single night. That becomes their saturation verse every night before they go to sleep. Homework can also be used in your efforts to probe into the heart issues. Example of this is how I once worked with a 7-year-old Anne. She was often mean, would not share, and spoiled things if she could not have her own way. During the counseling sessions, we talked about how this came from her heart, using Mark 7:21 through 23. That's where Jesus says, it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, it's what comes out of their heart. And then he describes it all. We drew pictures of her heart without Jesus, showing her as selfish, and then we added Jesus to the picture and talked about how he could help her not to be selfish if she chose to ask him for help. We also drew the consequences of letting her selfish heart rule her life without letting Jesus rule it. By the way, I'm not a great artist, and the pictures are quite elementary, not much above that of a 7 or 8-year-old. I usually let the children take these pictures home to remind them of what we talked about. For homework, Ann and I made a chart with I chose at the top and then 2 columns underneath headed my way and Jesus's way. Throughout the coming week, Ann was to place in the appropriate column the various behaviors expressed. Now you can involve the mom and dad by having them remind her at appropriate times to fill in the chart. Parents will tend to do this when behavior is negative, so they have to be urged to place as much importance on the godly behavior as on the ungodly behavior. Be creative but simple in the use of homework. Try to build on the things that are familiar to the child and on the child's natural interests: reading, drawing, acting, writing, playing, Legos, Play-Doh, cars, whatever it happens to be. And allow children to participate in developing the homework. This is very effective. Discuss it with them. A good question to promote their participation might be, what can you think of that you could do this week to help you remember not to be selfish and to practice being kind instead? Now, children can be very helpful in response to such questions. Be sure the parent understands what you're doing and their part in it. Make a homework assignment for them and let both the child and the parent know that you will check on them the following week to see how well they did. So, now the concluding thoughts are from a paper that Marty Ann wrote for us, Counseling Children. In counseling children, remember that they are going to have a hard time talking to a stranger about hard things, especially if they're coming from any type of abuse background. Here are a few tips that help when counseling children. 1, for the first meeting, try something different. One of the best ways to meet with children for the first time is by getting ice cream with them. This helps to break the ice, no pun intended. This puts them in a neutral and fun environment where they can easily feel more relaxed and comfortable. And it allows them to do something fun while meeting a new person. Shoulder time, companionship. Starting there helps to build that trust, that sense of comfort that it's okay. They can share with you, and you're safe for them. 2, don't address the main issue at first. Get to know them. Ask them about school, what their favorite or least subject at school is. Sports, what they like to do for fun. Is it reading, video games, playing outside, puzzles? What's your favorite video game? What do you like about it? When you play outside, what kind of games do you play? What's your favorite puzzle? What books do you like to read? What's your favorite book? Those kinds of things. Don't just ask them general, but ask them specific questions. Show a real interest. Ask them about friends at school or outside of school. Ask about church and church activities if that's part of their life. Learn about them. Be curious about them. You're a stranger, and if there's any abuse that has happened or any type of violation of trust, you're going to be the last person they want to talk to about any of it. You must earn their trust before they'll be willing or able to share the dark and scary stuff with you. 3rd, you'll probably need to meet with them several times, learning more about them before you can build a trust relationship with them. They need to know that you care about them, that they matter to you. Then over time, in conversations with you and as the trust relationship grows, they'll begin to share little things at first. As more time progresses and they're sharing more about their lives with you, you need to have the conversation about secrets. Talk to them about the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. Maybe even help them distinguish between secrets and surprises. An example of this is to tell them that a good secret is when we know about a surprise party for a person. We want to keep that a secret. We want to make it a surprise because we don't want to spoil the surprise for that person. But a bad secret is if someone, an adult or another child, tells them to keep something secret from our parents or other adults, that it's just a secret between the two of them. Then we explain if something happened between us and that other person and that made us feel yucky inside. Also, if when they told us to keep it a secret, it made us feel even yuckier inside, that's a clue that we need to tell either our parents or another adult that we trust, especially if the parents are the problem in that case. Find out if they are close to other family members or other adults, a teacher, Sunday school teacher, pastor, someone like that. And then if you're at a place when counseling children where you feel like you are stalled and are not getting any further in your counseling with that child, bring out the crayons and paper. Give them an opportunity to engage in something that is familiar and they can feel comfortable with. You might be surprised at the conversations that develop while coloring together. I do a lot of coloring. I do a lot of Legos or Lincoln Logs with boys. And we may get 3 or 4 bits of information in a session. And it may take us 5 or 6 sessions together to get what we might get in 15 minutes with an adult. But over time, that improves, that grows. So counseling children is a long, arcing involvement. So last thoughts. Keep in mind that children experience most of the problems that adults struggle with. Children can also be touched and changed by the living Word of God when it is presented to them in a way appropriate to their age and development. We are to make disciples of all nations, children included. So what are your thoughts, comments on what we covered? So let's take a look at timelines in children's grief, okay? So from infancy to about 2 years of age, children generally don't have a concept of death. And they react to the emotions of others. That's why if the child feels out of control, the last thing they need is for the parent to be out of control, because then they feel even more out of control. If the parent is angry, the child feels fearful. If the parent is sad, the child can feel sad or fearful. They can become worried, they can become anxious. And they will react to the separation from the one who cares for them. So that's why you see children lay on the floor and cry and sob when mom goes out to the mailbox. I mean, you know, it can seem silly, but to the child, this is devastating, okay? So their reactions. Now, remember, let's say a child between infancy and the age of 2 has a parent die, and the parent's not coming home ever again, okay? So let's say dad's died, not coming home again. Mom is really sad. Mom's a mess. The children are going to be very sad and be a mess. And they're going to react really strongly to that parent being gone now. So their reactions can be crankiness, can be lots of tears, can be vomiting because they're do all these hormones, stress hormones and fear hormones and all that stuff. And their toilet habits can go backwards. The child can be very clingy. The important thing is to keep the routine intact. They can't tell time, but they know that something is terribly wrong. The child is very capable of reacting to your stress. Have someone else care for them in the short term if possible, or come in to help care for them. As a normal routine as possible, but having someone there to help care for them and provide support so there can be a calm and a settledness in it. Then from 3 to 5 years, this is what we call the age of discovery. They're really using all 5 senses. They don't have much in the way of abstract thinking yet. Some will. They can hear you, but not necessarily interpret the information, or at least not very well. They don't have any concept of death for themselves. They'll have the concept of death for others. And it's usually, you'll see them start to bring it into play. Bam, 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 you're dead, you know. There's a finality to it, and they start to understand that. My granddaughter the other day was really sad. Told my wife, she says, Gaga, you're old, you're gonna die, and I'm gonna miss you, right? She wasn't sad or forlorn, it wasn't, you know, this big, but she's got a concept that, you know, my wife is feeble and weak, and that she's old, and that, you know, she's got this idea, you know, she actually saw it happen to the family dog, so she's kind of related those two things. And kids want to fix things for others, so they want to fix it. They want to soothe. They want to comfort. They want to find some way to resolve it. They also can easily believe that death is reversible because they've seen it on TV and movies, and they will often engage in magical thinking. Well, he'll be okay. He'll come back. He'll come home tomorrow. That kind of thing. And they think they have the power to kill, right? Because it's a final. It's an end of things. You talk about cemeteries and stuff like that. They don't get that. They aren't able to really conceive what cemeteries are about. They have no concept of shock, so they may show very little concern. They may seem almost nonchalant, but can be stricken later emotionally. Will finally catch up, and it'll finally make sense to them. They don't use catchy terms like passed away, that kind of stuff. They're dead. They died. You know, they'll say things like, "You got to be careful. You're falling ahead and crack your head open and die." Just very matter of fact type of language. Then from 6 to 10 years, they know they can die, and they can develop a fear of death. Their talk can then be very fearful. and they're going to need a great deal of reassurance at this point because they're a lot more emotionally connected to life and their relationships, and they realize the impact of loss far, far better. And then from 10 to 13, death is very personal. They have a very realistic view of death most times. And there's a curiosity regarding the biological aspects of death. They want to know how it works. They want to know why. Why did he get sick? How come that sickness killed? What did it do? Very curious. And there's called separation anxiety. They need affection, but they might be embarrassed by it. Now, boys in grief may lose some manual skills, and their grades may fall. Children need to, it says vent their feelings, so they need to express their feelings, not vent their feelings. To attend the funeral and then leave, and they'll look for permission. There may be emotional separation from the ones they love, a defense and self-preservation mechanism. Well, how do I know you're not going to die too? There can also be survivor guilt. They may feel guilty that they didn't die, and they may be mad at you for surviving and the other parent died and not you. So there's the sense of injustice, gross injustice, and they want it balanced out. They want it countered somehow. Then in the teen years, there's a lot more adult thought processes become evident. It's really important to encourage them to communicate. Doesn't matter what it is. Physical touch can be very important, but you need to ask, would you like a hug, something like that? Or I could use a hug, would you mind? That kind of stuff. And we do know that there's a whole lot of things that happen neurobiologically when you experience hugs. And you may need to engage in loving confrontation. I know you're mad, I know you're upset, I know you're hurt, I know you're scared. Yet we need to make sure that we're not doing things that are hurtful or harmful to other people when we feel like that. Okay, so there's points to keep in mind when dealing with children in grief. And this can be divorce, this can be loss of a pet, this can be death of a parent, the death of a sibling, even death of a grandparent if they're close to them. Children cannot sustain emotional pain for long periods of time. So they'll be in and out of it. Okay. Don't reject their emotions. Well, you shouldn't feel that way, or well, you should feel this way, or what, why are you so upset? Or don't reject their emotions. Don't tell them how to feel or how not to feel. And if the child wants to comfort you, allow that, because it's a way for them to feel comforted in comforting someone else. Be patient. They may need to ask the same questions over and over and over. But why? What happened? Well, like we talked about, and just continue to, because they may need to hear it over and over to be able to get their mind around it. It's also important that to make sure they understand death is not contagious. It's not like a cold. Okay, it's not like you're around the kids at school and they've got the sniffles, and 2 days later you got the sniffles, and then everybody in the house. Death isn't like that. Okay, they need order and stability maintained in their life. They need things to be safe and solid and secure. The less change you bring, the better. Now remember that children tend to idolize the dead. Help them to gently regain balance and perspective. Okay. There's a timing on that, but you see that I've seen that with teenagers who lost a parent when they were 8, 9 years old. By the time they're 13, 14 years old, that parent was flawless. Life was just ideal. They can actually end up experiencing a whole different level of grief over the perceived loss of the parent, of that version of the parent, when that wasn't how the parent really was. So children's reaction to death, they can be protective. There can be pain, despair, and a lot of disorganization, not being able to gather the thoughts or get distracted easily. There can be a hope for reconciliation. Now that is going to depend on age and personality and the relationship to the deceased. It's like my granddaughter told my wife the other day that when she died, she would be in heaven with Jesus and Bailey, her dog that died. So she was providing comfort to herself and to my wife, and the sense of reconciliation, reestablishing a relationship, right, and continuity of relationship. Their stable eating and sleeping patterns fall apart and then can return to normal, and they can be in and out of that, back and forth. They often move in and out of grief, and the different kinds of grief and aspects of grief. They need to know that they will be able to enjoy life again, and that if they happen to be enjoying life right now, it's not bad or wrong, because they'll need to play. They'll need to relieve their thinking and the pressure of the emotions. They need to know that their lives will not always be disorganized or the thinking cloudy the way it is right now. And let them know they don't have to be ashamed of their grief. And grief will often be revisited. When we talk about this, the first Christmas, the first set of holidays without that loved one in their life, that's a big deal. Like the first date, the first driving lesson, getting a license, prom, graduation, all of those big life events that parent or that loved one isn't going to be there for. There's another cycle of grief that can be experienced. That's a legitimate loss of what ought to have been but won't be. So allowing them to go through that and recognizing that that's very legitimate. Okay.